Hello YouTube, it's your boy B3, back with another tabletop gaming video. I might be doing some more vlog style tabletop gaming videos because I want to get more, like this channel recently has basically just been podcasts and movie reviews. So I wanted to throw some more gaming stuff out there since I've been doing a lot of TTRPG and just tabletop gaming stuff recently, which you know if you've been listening to the podcast. Link in the description below to our tabletop gaming podcast, Tabletop Recap. But today I want to talk about the TTRPG Historian, which is a type of player that I don't really hear people talk about a lot. Like, I always hear people talk about, like, the Edgelord and, like, the Lawful, and the people, like, you know, Edgelords, rule lawyers, etc., things like that. But I never hear anyone talk about this type of player. And I want to apologize if I don't stay in frame the whole time, but the viewfinder on my camera is broken, and I can't see the footage until I take it off the camera and put it on the computer, which is why you might see a lot of cell phone videos in the future. Oopsie daisy. So, let's talk about Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Just kidding. Let's talk about the tabletop gaming historian. So, I feel like it can't just be me experiencing this, but I feel like it's a lot worse for me than it is for other people because I I am in two tabletop gaming groups right now. One of which isn't really meeting anymore, and then one which meets basically every other week. So, in the first group that doesn't really meet anymore is where most of these problems lie. But that group was me, someone with a science degree, and a fan of science fiction and stuff. And then the other group was a bunch of high fantasy nerds. And no, this is the same group. So this group is me, science person, science career. And then all my friends who are high fantasy nerds, and every single one of them has a history degree. One of them runs a D&D campaign for us called the Theocracy. Our entire playthrough of the Theocracy is on the podcast. And it's actually one of the best Dungeons and Dragons stories that I've ever played. Like, he put years of work into this campaign that only lasted a few sessions, and it was worth it. It was an incredible thing, and it actually went much deeper than our characters explored it. Because it was just like big conspiracy, like you get framed for a crime. And you have to either prove your innocence or escape. We went for escape, but if we went for prove our innocence, hoo boy, there was a lot going on. But he based this entire campaign on, like, medieval German society. The politics of the time, the religion of the time, the architecture of the time, the technology of the time, etc., etc., etc. And he really wanted it to be accurate to that, despite it taking place in a fantasy world. And there's nothing wrong with, you know, basing your game off something historical. In fact, it's probably a good thing, because it kind of helps it be uniform, and it helps you keep it all straight. But, like, there were times when I would ask to do something or etc., and it'd be like, oh, well, that's not really accurate to the time period. And I'm like, not accurate to the time period that you made up? And it's like, no, not accurate to the medieval German time period. And then all the other players were like, oh, we're playing medieval Germany, but with tieflings and magic. Okay, done. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know everything about medieval Germany because I don't have a master's in history like the three of you. So going along, I was just like, I don't understand any of this, any of what's going on. I don't understand. Like, knowing the hierarchy of the church was very important, and I did not understand it, and all this stuff. And the other two players, like, completely understood, and I was just lost. I felt lost. I felt like I didn't know what was going on a lot of the time. And it all turned out fine. It all turned out completely fine. The DM was actually very, very good at explaining it to me. If he wouldn't have been as good as explaining it to me as he was, I probably wouldn't remember this as fondly as I do. But he was excellent at explaining the historical stuff to me. So that really helped, and which is why I remember that as one of the best D&D campaigns I've ever played. Homebrew or pre-written. But then we move on to a game I wrote, and it was just a game that took place in the 1920s. It was Call of Cthulhu 7th edition. The last game was Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And then this one is Call of Cthulhu 7th. Playing a game in the 20s because I was like, this is our first Call of Cthulhu game. It needs to, 1, be in the 20s, and 2, it needs to be it needs to have a creature with tentacles. I don't use Lovecraft's monsters. I either make my own or use like cryptids. But yeah. So what happens is we're going through character creation. And one of the players is like, can my character have a gun? And I was like, you're playing a cop. Of course you can have a gun. You're a police officer. And so we go to the back of the book, and we're looking at the weapons. And there's several different guns. And before we even started this game, I was like, guys, I'm going to do my best to learn 1920s stuff. In fact, there's even a lot of information about the 20s in the book, specifically to help me, or the Keeper in general, set the time period. So I was like, when we're playing, like, please don't go on about inaccuracies, because I can't know everything about the 20s. Once again, I have a science degree. The 3 of them have masters in history. And they were like, oh, we won't do that. Don't worry about it. Character creation, session 0. Before we're even playing, one of them is like, looking at the guns for his cop, and he's like, these don't make sense. I was like, what? Do you not understand, like, the combat mechanic? And he was like, no. This gun isn't super accurate to the time period. And also, these 2 handguns, the one that's more powerful is actually the weaker one in real life. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you said you wouldn't do this, man. And technically, he didn't break his promise, because he didn't correct my knowledge of the 20s when we were playing. Actually, when we played the actual one-shot, they didn't... either I got everything about the 20s correct, or they did a great job with not correcting me. And there's no way in hell I got everything correct. Because I am not smart or cool. Or good at games. So they did me a solid for that. But during character creation was a different story. And I was like, okay, let's not worry about that. They're just guns. They're all guns, okay? Just pick one, and I'll approve it. If I think your officer would have it. And he was like, well, my officer would have... And this part wasn't bad. He was like, my officer would actually specifically have this gun, because it was some historical thing about, like, a surplus of these guns from World War I. So... and a lot of them were distributed to police departments. And I was like, see, that's the kind of historical thing that I'm good with. It's like he picked his gun based on accuracy to the time period. And I was like, that's good. But don't give me a lecture on the stats not being accurate to the time period. Please. Please. And it actually really stressed me out down the line. Look, if... both these stories are about the same friend, and if you're watching this, my dude, there are 0 hard feelings. In fact, I look back on these as funny moments. Like, I don't look back on them and think, oh man, I wish we didn't do this. I think back on them and I laugh. So don't have any bad feelings about this. But it did kind of stress me out for a while, because when I was writing my longer campaign, I was like, I was spending almost all my time writing just looking up historical accuracy for every single little thing I was doing, and even like gun and alcohol laws for the time and stuff. And eventually and then there was like this one thing I was writing where they had to go to a house that was from like the 1800s, and I was also looking up historical accuracy for the 1800s, like what were their toilets like. Like, I was Googling what toilets were like in the late 1800s, and eventually I was just like, fuck this, we're playing in the modern day. Plus, some of the cryptids I wanted to use, I felt made more sense in a modern day setting anyways, like the Goat Man and etc. Like some I was going to use, and I was like, I feel like I could do a better Goatman story in a modern day setting. And there were just lots of creatures I wanted to use, like genetics wise, like lots of genetics stuff that wouldn't have been available in the 20s, and technology wise. So I was like, just make it modern day. But the first thing that made me want to make it modern day was I was so stressed about historical accuracy. So DMs, maybe don't force your characters to adhere to historical accuracy in a fantasy game, especially. Like, if you're playing Call of Cthulhu, like there's 1920 stuff in the rulebooks for Call of Cthulhu if you want to play in the 20s, or any other campaign setting, because you can get like Cthulhu by Gaslight and stuff to play in different eras. Just have them like read up what's maybe in the rulebook itself, and then just use that. You know, you don't have to make it like I shouldn't be able to write a thesis. I shouldn't have to be someone with the ability to write a thesis on this subject to understand, once again, the fantasy game that I'm playing. And also, and if you're doing it in a fantasy world and you're basing it off of a historical time period, that's great. But don't make it so that your fantasy game with lizard people and half-elves and dwarves and just straight-up high magic has to somehow have the same historical timeline as a real-world place. Just chill out, alright? With all the real-world knowledge you have to have that isn't common knowledge. Alright? If you want to base a bunch of stuff off World War II, like, a lot of people are going to have more common knowledge about things like World War II or the Civil War, which are the two wars that people never shut up about here in the South. Because we got a lot of Confederates and a lot of Nazis still. But, like, and it's the same with players. Like, if you're a player and you're in a medieval setting that your DM has made, and you're telling them that the tech and etc. and stuff isn't accurate to medieval times, you didn't write the world. In fact, the way that I see most fantasy worlds in these TTRPG games isn't it takes place in medieval times. The way I see it is more like technology hasn't progressed because they have magic. Like, if we had high magic like that in the real world that could heal almost anything and transmute things and etc., would our technology be so advanced? No, it fucking wouldn't, because we wouldn't need it to be. We wouldn't need vaccines if you could just go to the temple and have a cleric wave their hand over you and you're fine. Right? We wouldn't need it. So that's just kind of my rant. I know it wasn't very well structured. It was definitely a rant. I was all over the place, and I'm sorry. But yeah, thank you all very much for your support. Remember to rate, comment, subscribe. Check out all the cool links in the description below, Facebook, Twitter, etc. I also want to do a video on lots of different TTRPG systems that people are less familiar with, and why you should use them instead of just repurposing D&D for everything, so keep an eye out for that video. I might end up making it on my phone because I can't see anything. Like, my viewfinder's just white. It's just straight white. You can't see a thing. So that's it. Thank you all once again. See y'all next time.